Clay.com can be one of the most technical, challenging tools out there. And even if you've used it for a long time already, there is probably still a lot that you don't know. Which is why in this video, I'll be giving you 32 of my best Clay.com tips to make your experience with Clay.com way better and allow you to get the most out of it. If you want, go ahead and open up Clay in another tab so you can follow along, and let's get right into it. Starting off with my Clay.com tip number 1, we're going to talk about how you can deduplicate data. And a lot of the time when you're importing data into Clay, you would find that you have duplicate rows. As you can see over here, we have Max Mitchum here twice, and if we are to run any enrichment, it will mean that we're getting the same data points for double the amount of credits. So in this case, to avoid doing this, all we need to do is click on the column and click on dedupe over here, and automatically it will tell us how many duplicate rows we have, and we can delete the duplicate rows. To avoid any future duplicate contact or company data, all you need to do is learn this magic button in the bottom right hand corner of my screen right now, where it says auto dedupe is disabled. You can click on that. You can enable automatic deduplication. And if we click on select a column, we can select where we don't want to have the duplication occur, for example, the full name, and we can then click on save changes. If I'm trying to add Max into the list once again, you would see it disappear because automatically we're now deduplicating every row. Now it's about time that we talk about tip number 2, and specifically about how you can find email addresses just based on the full name of a specific individual. Now, in order to be able to find the email address of a person, you typically would need 2 inputs. The first input is the full name of the individual, and the second input is the website of the company where this person works. In this case, what we would do as a first step in order to find out where this individual works right now, we would use Claygent. So for this, you can click on Actions in the top right corner and type in Claygent. Straight away, you will come up with the AI web researcher, and over here we can type in, find me the website of where this full name works. I'll put just the website URL and nothing else. We can then click on generate. I would always recommend for this task to be switching to 4.0 mini, which you can see on my screen right now. And over here, we can then just click on save and run 2 rows. Straight away, we should be able to find the website of where these folks work. Now it's about time that we feed all of this data in order to be able to find their email address. So for this, we'll click on actions in the top right hand corner, and we will then type in find work email. Over here, we can select a bunch of different options. I would suggest going for the waterfall. You can fill in the full name and the company website URL of the individual, and then save and run 2 rows in this view. And here we are. We can see that straight away find email found their email address, which you can see on the right hand side over here when your waterfall finishes. Now, moving on to tip number 3, and this will help you avoid a lot of bugs inside of Clay.com, and it will spare a lot of conversations with Clay's customer support. I'm going to show you one really boring detail that 99% of Clay newbies overlook, and it's super important to not cause you bugs inside of your Clay tables. So you can see over here, we tried to find the website of a company, and we can see if we click on the column and we scroll down over here to text, it shows us all the different column types. We always need to make sure that the column type is correct. So if it's a website link, it has to be a URL. If the output is just a number, it has to be a number, and so on. So in this case, it says over here the T stands for text. So we need to convert it to URL so that you can see straight away this changes it to a URL format. Now let's talk about Clay tip number 4, and that's how you should be using the Clay email waterfall in order to find the maximum amount of emails possible inside of Clay. For those of you that may not be aware, all you need to do is click in the top right corner on actions and type in work email. So for this, what I suggest you do is you just select the appropriate waterfall enrichment. So in my case, I'm going to click on work email over here. And as we already talked about in tip number 1 of this video, you would always need the full name and the company website of where the individual works in order to be able to find the email address of the person. We then need to click through to full configuration, and below you would be able to see all the different email providers. Typically, I would suggest 2 main providers, and I would suggest that all of you choose between either Better Contact, which you can see over here to find work emails, or Full Enrich. And I have no affiliation with neither of these tools. However, from my experience, both Full Enrich and Better Contact provide you access to over 20 different email providers. So when you use just the full enrichment on its own, you're already tapping into 20 different find email databases. And then you can click on add action, and you can also choose some other providers. So in my case, I'm going to add Better Contact, and I'm going to also add Full Enrich as well. And I'm going to bump them up so they're the top of this list here as well. More than that, I always suggest that another thing you do is when you scroll down to validation, when you use validation, that will verify the email address after the email address is found. I would suggest that whatever provider you use for validation, you get a paid plan with them separately rather than spending Clay credits. So in this case, I'm going to switch the providers to LeadMagic because I have a LeadMagic subscription. And then you can just click on save and run 2 rows. And this will show to us what a Clay waterfall is. A Clay waterfall basically goes through multiple different providers until it finds the email. So we'll go to email provider number 1, then number 2, then number 3, and so on. On to tip number 5. One thing that you absolutely must know how to do inside of Clay is how to enrich a LinkedIn profile. What I mean by that is a lot of the time you typically will have the full name of an individual. You might have the website of the company where this individual works, or maybe their company website. However, you would not yet have their LinkedIn profile. If you are an absolute rookie and you're new to Clay, typically you will click on actions in the top right hand corner and you will use one of the enrichments, which will cost you a lot of Clay credits. So instead, I'm going to teach you right now how you can spend 0 Clay credits on finding the LinkedIn profile of a person. So simply put, all you need to do for this is type in Claygent into the search bar. Straight away, you would see on the screen over here, it says Claygent AI Web Researcher. And over here, you can just say, the input is the person's name. Based on the name and the website of their company, find me the person's LinkedIn profile and nothing else. And then we'll just give the name and use / to refer to the full name column, and we'll give the website and refer to the website column. After that, we can click on generate. This will generate a mega prompt for us. So in other words, we don't need to sweat every single part of that prompt. It'll be automatically created for us. And I'll show you in a second why and how this will cost us 0 Clay credits in the process. It has generated a pretty decent prompt, and all that this leaves us with is the ability over here to switch the model. I personally recommend switching to the 4.0 mini model in most cases, especially if you're watching this in 2025 right now. And by clicking on this model, you're then able to click on add account and add your own OpenAI API key. After that, you just click on save and run the rows. And what we will see straight away is that Claygent is then able to go and find the LinkedIn profile of this individual. And this will not cost you any Clay credits in the process, because remember, 1 Clay credit costs 3.5 cents. And instead, if I click over here right now, this costs us 1/10 of a cent, maybe 1/20th of a cent, an absolute fraction of the price of that. Tip number 6 is all about how you should be saving templates inside of Clay. Now, let me show it to you on my screen right now. So over here, you can see that we're cleaning up the first name. And if we click on edit column, you can see the entire prompt, which is very, very long. And it will be ridiculously tedious to memorize this prompt and to have to draft it completely from scratch every single time. To spare us the pain and misery of basically trying to copy and paste this prompt or go to a previous Clay table where we created that prompt originally, all we can do is click on save as a template and save this prompt over here by giving it a name and the description. This way, next time, all you need to do is click on Browse Templates, and over here, you will see all of your prompts that you generated in the past and all of the templates that you generated for the specific enrichment. Worth noting that you can also save as templates all the other steps. So for example, this email waterfall that you can see on my screen right now, I can also save it as a template, and next time you would spare me the time of connecting for 4 different email finders. On to tip number 7. In the top left-hand corner of my screen, if you're looking right now, of course, you can click on live, and this toggle will take you to sandbox mode. What this will mean is whenever you import data into the Clay table, you can switch it to sandbox mode so that you can start testing the Clay table without risking of burning a lot of Clay credits in the process. So I very much recommend whenever you have some sample data and you're just building your Clay table from scratch, all you need to do is just import 5 or 10 rows of data and then just click on the toggle, switch to sandbox mode. And this way, hopefully you'll save quite a lot of Clay credits in the process. Tip number 8, for those of you that may not be aware, if you click click on no filters in the middle of your screen, which you can see on my screen right now. You can click on no filters, and over here you're able to filter based on individual columns, similarly to how you would have done this inside of Excel or Google Sheets previously. So if you click over here on the left-hand side, you can select from the drop-down a specific column header. And in this case, let's say we want to filter for the country to be equal to India, for example. And straight away in this view, we'll see every single lead in this lead list that comes from India. You can also pair different filters together. So you can also pair filter where country is equal to India and the LinkedIn profile URL is not empty, for example, and it will once again come up with that list of leads for us as well. You can also change the filtering over here as well. You'll have the option to combine two different filters by saying this and that, or you can also say this or that. So you can just flick this switch over here and switch to or, and it will then show you a bigger list of people. This segues nicely into tip number 9, which is how you should be using different views inside of the clay table. So if you just created those filters just now, what you can do is on the default view in the top left hand corner, click on duplicate view and name this view, for example, India, and you can see that the filters have been applied. So now if you just click on this toggle in the top left hand corner on the view itself, you can click on duplicate view, and now you can give it another name. For example, you can double tap into it and you can say Germany, and the only thing that you would need to do is just go into the filters and change the country over here from India to Germany, and they can click here, they can see every single lead that they need to go after in India, for instance. Now, tip number 10, let's talk about how you should be naming columns inside of Clay. As you can see on my side over here, I label columns in 3 different ways. The first type of columns are labeled as inputs. The inputs are the data points that need to be imported inside of the Clay table in order for the Clay table to run. So for example, in this table, we're going after followers of competitors. So this is a standardized template. All we need to do is we need to input the full name, the first name, last name, job title, location of the person, and the rest of the Clay table will run itself pretty much. So the inputs, in my opinion, need to be labeled to perfection so that if you are to use this template again, you know that all you need to do is just drag all of that data into the Clay table and the rest will take care of itself. The second thing you need to be naming is any sort of checks that you're doing. So any sort of qualification steps. For example, does this person qualify for our ICP? Does this company qualify for our ideal client profile? And on top of that, you can also label things as steps. So for example, step 2, enrich company. Step 3, check if the company fits the ICP. Step 4, find the email of the lead. If you just label your inputs and you label step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4 with every enrichment, any of your colleagues would understand what your Clay table does, so they can actually use the Clay table pretty fast themselves. Secondly, on top of that, it just makes it a lot nicer to look at. And then one final thing, apart from the inputs and the steps, we also label the outputs. So you can see in my case over here, we always label email 1, email 2. As we scale our agency right now, it's super, super important for us to be labeling every single column to perfection, because otherwise, as soon as someone else comes in and tries to use one of these Clay templates, the chances are they will be completely confused unless you label all of these columns to perfection. Tip 11 now, which is all about color coding the columns inside of your Clay table. In our case, because we have a bunch of different clients that we deliver Clay tables for, and in this case over here, we always color code the columns by just selecting on the column, clicking on change color, and just color coding it here with one of the options. And basically what that enables us to do is to color code the inputs in green so that it's super clear visually for us what are the inputs that need to be populated in order for the Clay table to run. We then make sure that any enrichments that need to be edited before running the Clay table will be in yellow, because it shows to our team that, hey, don't run this Clay table. If something is in yellow, just edit it first. And then afterwards, if we have any bugs at all or anything of that sort in the table, we mark those columns in red, because once again, when you're talking to the Clay customer support or you're talking internally within your company, it's a lot easier to say, hey, just check out the column which is in red over here. I have no idea what's going on there, right? Tip number 12. This could be absolutely mind-blowing for those of you that have still not figured out how to draft messages for each individual lead inside of the Clay table. And super simply put, the button that you're looking for is located here. If you click on add column, you would see this message icon pop up. And over here in the body, you can just type in any random text using the backslash to refer to a column header. So as an example, I can say, hi first name, comma, what's your 5 kilometer PB as an example. I can then give this a subject line, 5-kilometer PB, and then just click on save. What I will see is it does not cost me any clay credits, but it just then generates the entire message for each individual person in the clay table. Moving on, tip number 13, you should be using formula on every enrichment inside of clay. As an example here, you can see that step 1 was to enrich a job, and step 2 was to enrich a company after we enrich the job. However, if you look at this logically, over here, this data is incomplete. So we cannot really do anything. We cannot reach out to these companies where the job has not enriched properly. In this case, we do not need to run all 10 rows in step 2 if data from step 1 is empty. So what we can do here is we can click on edit column and scroll down to the very bottom and click on use AI and say only run if title is not empty. You do need to use formulas under every single enrichment in order to save clay credits. And then we can click output is correct. So over here, we can put only run if normalized job title is not empty, click on generate formula, and it will show you they can only run 5 rows instead of 10 rows, saving you half of the clay credits in the process. So now if we rerun these rows, you would notice that the run condition was not met, meaning that you save half of the clay credits. Tip number 14, 99% of the clay users get this wrong, and they use their clay plan with all their clay credits, which typically will cost you 3 cents per clay credit. Now, instead, what you should be doing is clicking your name in the top right-hand corner, going into settings, going into connections, and over here connecting your own API key for any of these tools directly into Clay. What this will mean is whenever you run an enrichment, you would not be spending Clay credits, but instead you'll be just spending some money directly with these suppliers of data. And as an example here, for instance, if we take into account something like OpenAI, with OpenAI, the chances are you will be spending 0.0001 per run compared to spending 3 cents on every single run. You can just click on add connection and you can basically add any of your accounts that already exist. And this will save you a lot of Clay credits. And it's really, really important that you add all of your tools that you have access to right now over here so that you don't spend Clay credits on those. Tip number 15 is all about how to not spend too many Clay credits on enrichments that simply don't work. So 99% of the time, what I recommend is after you created the prompt for the first time, instead of running all the rows straight away, just click on save and don't run. And after that, just click play on one specific row to see the output for one row before running it across the entire table. Tip number 16 is all about adding a do not contact list. What you can do for this is you can go into your CRM, your random scrappy spreadsheet with all your existing clients or past prospects that you got in touch with and you have proposals with, and create one master spreadsheet with all of those contacts in that. And then after that, just click on add, import from CSV, and upload a do not contact list, because it's super, super important inside of Clay for you to have a do not contact list so that you can use that to your advantage to exclude those people from outreach. Now, moving on, let's talk about tip number 17. And this is all about how you can actually use a do not contact list to make sure that you don't reach out to companies or people that you're already engaged with, or you simply don't want to contact in the future. So essentially in this case, let's imagine that in table 1 over here, we have all of our leads that we're reaching out to. And in table 2, we have the do not contact list. What we basically need to do is we need to look up the do not contact domain to make sure that this does not match with a domain of this person that we're reaching out to. So for this, we can click on actions in the top right corner and type in look up multiple rows. Over here, we need to choose the free enrichment, which will look up multiple rows in other table. And we would need to select the table that we want to search. In this case, it's quite straightforward because we want to search the DNC list table that we've just created. And we want to target the company website. We just want to check if right now the website is similar amongst those two Clay tables. We can see over here, it says one record found. So what we can do here is we can click on the record, we can click on number of results and add that as a column. And then going forward, let's imagine that we want to add those individuals into email outreach, for example. So let's just have a look here, add lead to campaign, and let's select a campaign very quickly here as well. At the bottom here, what we can do is we can click on use AI and we can now say only run if number of results is 0, because we don't want this person to have been contacted before. Let's just do that. We don't want the person to be in the DNC list. Output is correct, say formula. And this way, what will happen is we would not contact Max in this case, because as we can click over here, you would see that run condition is not met, because this person has been on the do not contact list. Now, tip 18 is all about how you can find companies completely for free inside of Clay. I think a lot of people are familiar with this, but still a lot of people, I guess, don't use this function for some reason. But essentially, whenever you're inside of the Clay menu over here, you can click on find companies and you would get a pretty decent list of companies, especially if you're looking for companies that can be easily found and scraped from LinkedIn. You can filter over here for those using the filters. So for example, let's say we're looking for accounting businesses. Let's say we're looking at anyone with over 50 employees, and we can also then filter based on location. So I'm just going to filter for the United States. Straight away, you'll come up with a pretty decent list of 1.8k businesses. We can click on continue, and this would create a Clay table with all of those businesses. Essentially, my point with this is that you should be using the find companies function simply because it doesn't cost you any Clay credits, and the chances are it gives you very similar data to LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Apollo or whatever other place to find the rest of the data as well. Now, moving on to tip number 19. You can also find people completely for free inside of Clay. So let's say if we're looking at people that work all of these companies that we just found, all we need to do is click on actions and we can type in find people, and you would see this enrichment over here where it says query data to find people. We just need to click on that, and over here you can see that it found in total 47,000 people working for that 2,000 companies. So we need to basically filter out any titles that are not founder, owner, or CEO as a quick example here. And straight away, that will shorten the list to 353 people. The one thing to keep in mind here is to always to add a good company identifier. You can identify companies in two ways. You can either identify them based on the LinkedIn company page URL or by the website domain. So what I recommend is flicking between those two. And you can see right now it found 1,848 results based on the website of the company. But then if I flick it to the LinkedIn URL of the company, it only finds 353. So clearly in this case, we need to be using the domain as the company identifier. And then over here, you can limit for results. For instance, I can limit for 2 people per company. I can limit it to 100 people in total. And then I can click on continue and import it to a new table. Now we'll talk about tip number 20, and it's about how you can share templates inside of Clay. So some of you may be aware of this, but let's take this as an example. We have this template, which is called followers of competitors. And basically all we need to do is have our team input the full name, first name, last name, and job title of a person, and the rest of the workflow will run pretty much automatically for us. And as a part of this workflow, what we want to do is, let's imagine we want to share it with our colleagues without them having to just basically go into this Clay workspace straight away. All we need to do is click on the name of the workbook, click on share as template, click on copy, and there you have it. You have a URL link, which you can copy and paste into the browser. There you are. You have a great template that you can share with any of your friends. You can post about this on LinkedIn and get plenty of engagement, I'm sure, with people opting in to grab this template that you've just created. Now let's talk about tip number 21, which is to stop auto updates of enrichments. If you're building a Clay table, what you want to do is click on edit column for every individual enrichment and make sure that auto update is switched off, and just click on save, because what this will mean is when you're just testing out and building the Clay table, you wouldn't just run all of the enrichments from left to right automatically, because it will just cost you a lot of Clay credits in the process of doing that. So rather what we're going to do is we're going to just click on edit column under each individual row, click on auto update to be switched off, click on save, and now going forward, you wouldn't be spending any Clay credits on just test running the Clay table, and hopefully that will save you plenty of Clay credits with that as well. Now let's talk about tip number 22, which is exactly how you should be using templates that someone else shares with you. So typically they will send you a link that looks something like this, and the first thing you would need to do is click on create workbook using template, click on that and select your workspace. So for instance, right now, as you can see over here, I've just selected the B2B boosted workspace. I'm going to click on create workbook, and what this basically does is it copies this entire template and copies and pastes it inside of my own business's workspace. The one downside with this is that you don't have any data inside. So what I recommend is for you to basically just input a couple of rows of test data so that you can see how this workflow runs for you. And then after that, in a separate tip in this video, I'll be sharing with you how to use those templates that someone else has shared with you. Now, tip number 23, and I think this is super important to oversimplify Clay for a lot of you watching this today. I want you to think about Clay as a 3 part system. The first part of that system is the inputs. The inputs are the things that we need to feed into Clay in order for Clay to be effective. This can be job data, it can be people data, it can be company lists, anything of that sort. You need to go and source that data somewhere else most of the time outside of Clay and just import it into Clay. You can do that via webhooks, via APIs, via importing CSV files as well. Now that you have the data inside as an input, Clay can do all of this funky research, AI personalization, and all of that stuff for you. And then finally, you have the output, which is email automation, LinkedIn automation, and all of the other fun stuff. What I'm trying to say here is Clay is just a bridge between the inputs and the output. So before you jump into Clay, I very much recommend that you understand what are the input tools and what are the other sales tools that you need in place in order for Clay to be successful for you? What are the outputs that you're trying to achieve with Clay in terms of email automation, LinkedIn automation, and so on? And only after buying the inputs and the outputs elsewhere, only then you jump into Clay and you try to connect all of these tools all together. Now, tip 24 is somewhat boring, but once again, it's all about saving you as many Clay credits as possible. In the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you would see inside of the Clay table this button which says auto update columns is enabled for this table. If you want to not spend Clay credits as often, especially when you're just building out the Clay table and you're testing the data, you need to click on turn off table. This way the table would not run every single time that you change a prompt or anything of that sort, and they will save you a lot of Clay credits in the process. Talking about Clay credits, if you previously spent a lot of Clay credits in the past and you just want to understand what you actually spent all of your Clay credits on, all you need to do is click on your name in the top right hand corner, head over to settings, head over to credit usage, and over here you can actually see everything that you have been spending Clay credits on. So in this case, I can see that I've spent 48,000 credits on one specific Clay table. This gives you the opportunity to basically then go into that Clay table and see the specific enrichments that you have been spending money on. Now, tip number 26, inside of Clay, you can also get job data, specifically from LinkedIn jobs. Inside of your Clay workspace, just click on find jobs over here. You can filter for specific types of job titles. So for example, sales, growth, and so on. And then you can also filter based on locations and such filters. For example, I can look for sales roles in Colorado, and then here I can click on continue, and it will populate the entire Clay table with all of that job data for me. More than that, if you are interested in job data, you can then click on enrich job, and this will give you the exact job description that has been fully scraped for you, and it does not cost you any Clay credits. So you can click here on enrich job, select the job ID. So the job ID will be this job ID over here of the previous job from over here, and then you can just save and run the rows, and it will basically give you for each one of those jobs, it should give you the normalized job title, the job description, and so on. And the other cool thing with the job data enrichment, it's the fact that you can filter for job description keywords. So for example, if you want to look for companies that use HubSpot, if that's your competitor, or if it's a complementary tool to yours, you can just type in the keyword and then it will just basically preview all the jobs that have been posted for sales and growth roles in Colorado with HubSpot in the job description. And you can basically just use that as a signal to qualify those companies for your services or products. Let's talk about tip number 27, and that's all about how you can find work emails using just the LinkedIn profile of a person as the input. Typically, the easiest way to pull this off is to click on actions, type in Prospeo, and use this enrichment, which is to find work email and enrich person from LinkedIn. Over here, you just plug in the LinkedIn profile URL, click on save and run the row. And essentially within just a couple of seconds, this will allow you to scrape the LinkedIn profile of the person for their full name, job title, summary, skills, work experience, education, everything of that sort. Also, you can see their follower count and the connections count. This is super, super important because if obviously a person has a lot of followers, maybe over 500 followers or over 500 connections on LinkedIn, the chances are they're more active on the platform. And for that reason, they could be a better fit as they're simply more likely to read your messages if you do send them a message from LinkedIn. And more than that, this finds you the email straight away as well. Now, tip number 28. Here I'll show you how you can import data into an existing Clay table. So all we need to do is click on actions, click on sources, and click on import from CSV. This way you can then basically export any sort of CSV from a spreadsheet and import it by dragging and dropping it over here. You can then select to add this CSV file to the current table and proceed to map all of the columns. One thing to keep in mind is you would need to map it to the right column. So in this case, if we built a template and if we labeled the template to perfection, like we've done in this case here, what we need to do is click on full name and make sure that it matches input one full name, and then the rest of it, let's say the LinkedIn profile matches the input's LinkedIn profile, and so on. So after you've finished mapping it, you can click on add to table and always always say save and don't run. Never press save and run rows in this CSV, because that will start running and that will start costing you a lot of Clay credits. So as soon as the data is imported, you can then see for how it looks like. You can see the full name is in the right place. All of this data is in the right place. And only after you can see the data here, only then after that, you can just click on the play button here to start running the rows, just to make sure that 1 row, 2 rows work absolutely fine before running the rest of the Clay table. Now, tip number 29. I very much encourage anyone that's watched this far into the video to join the Clay community. All you need to do is head over to community.clay.com to do this, because in my opinion, it's the fastest way for you to first of all learn Clay, because it has a tutorials channel, it has all the updates on new features, and it just keeps you on top of everything that you need to know about Clay. And it's the best place to get any sort of fast support, because it's not just Clay's customer support that hangs out inside of the community, it's also freelancers, educators, and everyone of that sort. So by all means, go sign up for the Clay community. It's completely free. All you need to do is head over to community.clay.com to do that. One super underused way to get support inside of Clay is by clicking on the question icon next to your name in the top right hand corner of the Clay table. If you click on help over there, you should be able to ask a question, and any question that you ask, 99% of the time, the AI agent will be able to answer fairly well. And then if you want any support beyond that, it will basically forward you to a human, where a human can actually check your Clay table and help you out. One bit of advice for that is whenever you are talking to Clay's customer support, always make sure to copy and paste the link to the Clay table so that the customer support team can just log into that Clay table and see what's going on. Tip 31. Don't try to use anyone's pre-built Clay templates. Now, let me explain. A lot of people would post on LinkedIn with their crazy AI agents, Clay templates, or anything of that sort. The reality is, it probably does work for the person that posted about it. However, you probably do not have access to the exact same sales tools. You probably don't need to sequence them through SmartLead, or you don't want to send them a LinkedIn message via HeyReach, but rather you have your own existing tech stack. So instead, what I suggest is use those templates as a reference point for just pure inspiration behind what enrichments they use, what prompts they use, and so on, and then just build your own Clay table completely from scratch using some of that inspiration. Because as soon as you're trying to build any Clay tables by just copying and pasting an existing template, the chances are it will take you 10 times longer to adapt that to your own needs. And 99% of the time, you would regret that you're trying to just basically piggyback off someone else's Clay template altogether. Now, to top it all off, in my opinion, every single person should understand the sales tools that they need to buy before upgrading to a paid Clay plan. So as a quick example here, if you're looking to do cold email outreach, Clay cannot do all the cold outreach for you. You still need to go and buy email domains externally. You still need to go and buy email finders externally. You probably need to go and buy an email verification tool, and you probably need to warm up those domains and send automated emails using a tool like SmartLead or Instantly as well. So what I'm trying to say with this is, before you consider taking Clay super seriously and spending hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars on Clay, by all means, go and write down all the tools that you think you need. Go speak to a Clay expert to get that clarified, and only then consider upgrading to a paid Clay plan, because otherwise what you'll end up with is a super expensive Clay subscription, only to then realize that you need a bunch of other sales tools that you did not budget for. So I recommend that you get a bigger picture understanding first, and only then upgrade for a paid plan with Clay. Now, if you got a lot of value from this video, I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this video right here. Because over there, I go over the 4 main ways that you can actually use Clay to personalize your outbound messages. So if you want to get even better at Clay, and if you want better results, I will see you over there.